Hey guys, Liana here. It's Tatas Tuesday, which I'm thinking of changing to Boobs Tuesday because boobs seems to draw in a lot more interest, we'll say interest, to YouTube, because traffic and interest are not the same thing. But I wonder if it might be too on the nose. I like Tatas because it's a little slightly to the right of the nose. But if it's gonna bring in more people watching, that's the YouTube game. But anyway, for this week, Tatas Tuesday is about this whole Spider-Gwen Frank Cho shitstorm. And full disclosure off the top, Frank is a friend of mine. There's no denying that. He's signed my butt on numerous occasions. You will find photos of Frank and I in positions similar to this online from various Comic-Cons and TV appearances and things like that. Some of his critics are also people I know, borderline friends of mine, in that I don't know them well, but I like them. So I want to say in advance, this is not about anything personal. This is simply an examination of the issue that, in my opinion, has gotten out of hand. And to me, you know, the whole thing has been about, you can see the Rob Liefeld thing on the side here. That's the follow-up story where Rob Liefeld actually spoke out saying, you know, let artists do art, don't, you know, well, let's look at his actual words. Let's not paraphrase him here. Let's let Rob Liefeld speak for himself. You know, so he has all this stuff. Allow me for a minute to direct this diatribe, specifically my comic book brethren. In recent time, I haven't joined in the fray, but this time I have to stand up. I just finished reading a disturbing rant by a fellow who took, in my humble opinion, uncalled for shots at two stellar talents in our industry, Frank Cho and J.J. Scott Campbell. I think it's J. Scott Campbell. Let's establish here at the outset that these two are a pair of comic book wizards. I don't think that's the internet form of wizard he's referring to. Visual stylists that have been at the top of the comic book mountaintop and have entertained the masses for nearly 2 decades. Both men are famous for their renderings of female physique, an art form once referred to as cheesecake by possibly the best illustrator comic books ever saw, Dave Stevens. Okay, nobody cares about this stuff. Background. From my experience with both, they are generous, warm, and have a great sense of humor. I can say that's true of Frank. It has been publicly suggested recently that each stop drawing in their respective styles, equating them with being dirty and perverted. And it goes on from there. And he's right, that has been the issue. The thing that a lot of people miss about Frank Cho is he's a satirist as well as, you know, a very good artist. I've, you know, seen some of his non-commercial stuff, and I want to be clear, even though this is a mock-up, this image you're looking at right now, it did not appear on any of the actual comic book covers. Marvel does these blank covers where artists can draw on them. I have a dupe drawn by Leonard Kirk in a similar fashion. It never appeared on the cover. It's commissioned art that is just done on these comics. It's a neat idea. It's a nice little keepsake of a visit. So Frank did this on his own. And it's a parody of first of all, the whole, you know, Spider-Gwen becoming crazy popular, and I don't get it, so I'm not even gonna weigh into that. I fully admit not to understanding the whole Gwen Stacy thing, but I haven't been a real hardcore Spider-Man fan since I was a teenager. Spider-Man was what I started reading in terms of superhero comics, but I moved on from there. The thing I liked about Spider-Man is he got a cold. That was the "this is amazing" moment for me with Spider-Man, as he was sitting on top of, you know, it might have been the Empire State Building or something like that, and he sneezed into his mask, and it was really gross, and it was the first time I'd ever seen, you know, a superhero have an illness like regular people, and that is the brilliance of Spider-Man. That is Spider-Man to me in a nutshell. He's a regular dude being a superhero. So, but this is a parody image. And I want you to take very close attention to the position of the head and the way the hips are oriented, because here, this looks mostly like, oh no, he's got it mostly. I'd still say the head's a tiny bit off center here, but it's certainly no comparison to the original, which looks like she has a broken neck. This is the Milo Manara cover that Frank is parodying in the Spider-Gwen thing. And this caused a big stink because this actually was a variant cover. But people got really upset about it for various reasons. I looked at it and basically went, you want me to pay for that? It's amateurish work. It's certainly not Manara's best work. I wouldn't necessarily recommend Googling Milo Manara's work with your Google safe search off, because there's a lot of Sarlacc pit imagery, if you get what I'm saying. He likes to draw women from the perspective of a baby being brought into this world, if you get my sense. Now, I'm sure there's a market for that. And, you know, smut is smut. It is what it is. The issue here was, people said it was sexist, but to me it's more, does a woman who looked like she has spina bifida and, covered in body paint with her neck broken belong on the cover of a variant of a mainstream Marvel book? But that's an old fight. And her lips look like she's upside down too, but maybe she just missed with her lip liner. This is, to me, my whole issue with this drawing is I don't think it's up to professional standards, personally. Is it sexist? I really can't say that, because if you look at other drawings of Spider-Man, he's in similar butt-in-the-air poses. They climb buildings. They do that squatty, limber thing all the time. It's just, I personally think that the reason that people freaked out about this is it's unnatural, and because it's a woman, people screamed sexist, and that's to me not the issue. Sexism is one of those things you have to sort of objectively prove, not necessarily beyond a reasonable doubt, but you have to show reasonable backup as to why one would claim sexism. And I don't know what you'd say. Maybe it's because her clothes look like they're painted on. Yeah, you probably wouldn't do that to a guy. That's the only argument I can really see, because she's not in a sexualized pose. It doesn't even look comfortable. Her butt looks like it's about to Pac-Man that building right there. Wow, wow, wow. That building's a power pellet. Munch, 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 munch. But is that sexist? Would it send a different message if a man was doing that? Maybe they wouldn't have drawn a man's butt looking like it, was going om nom nom, or something breaching the water or something like that. But again, that's an anatomy thing, not necessarily a gender representation thing. Is it objectifying? No, it's not. The majority of her body parts are visible. She's not missing anything that would indicate her as human, so, there's no lack of consent issue here. So those are the things. And I'm only going through this because I think people, we throw the word sexism around, and it's becoming this, I don't know porn, but I'll know it when I see it kind of thing. And we do need standards. We do need pass-fail conditions for sexism. So I'm trying to show you some tools that can be applied to determine whether something is sexist. And usually a good be a good starting point to just kind of, easy pass fail is imagine a guy in this position. Would it send a different message? Or can you imagine a guy in this position? If you can't see a man being depicted in the way a particular woman is, well, then you have to start looking closer at the image. That's, sort of a replacement test that is often used. But when we flip back to Frank's thing, we don't have those anatomical problems. You can see both her legs. She's crunched up in an I'm looking for my contact lens kind of thing, and she's sort of looking at the camera, coquettishly. And, I guess that sexist thing is Spider-Man looking at her butt. But if you know anything about Spider-Man, it's kind of in character. Spider-Man is constantly being gone gaga by, Black Cat and various other ladies. Spider-Man has issues with the girls. And that's what, allegedly makes him relatable and all that stuff. Spider-Man sort of waffles between, don't get mad, it's true, male fantasy, because that's the purpose of Spider-Man. It's the everyman, right? And people who relate to Spider-Man want to see him win sometimes. So he alternates between, male fantasy and that, awkwardness that average guys get around women. And I think this is in character. If it was Superman doing it, I'd go, meh. But there have been plenty of, if you want to say, oh, that makes Spider-Man kind of dirty or things like that, well, maybe it does. But flaws make a character more interesting, right? And an awkwardness around women is a valid character trait that doesn't make the whole work sexist. Because if you know anything about Spider-Man and you know anything about Frank Cho's work, in Frank Cho's work, the next frame after a guy is caught doing this is the woman punching him in the face. He has this run-on joke in his Liberty Meadows comics about, comic strips, about this pig named Dean. And he's a pig to women, and then they punch him in the face. And, it's the old, Bugs Bunny X Band-Aid across, and the birdies flying around, and there's some wah, wah, wah punchline. But this is usually followed up by a punch in the face, And that's the thing to sort of know about Frank Cho's work. He's showing a dynamic that happens, but he's doing it fully aware that the man in question is being an idiot. And that's what I like about Frank's work, and that's what makes Sexy and Sexist different to me, is that he's aware of the consequences of doing that stuff in real life. He knows where the lines are. He knows to look but not touch, sort of thing. And that's why he's good at parody, because he understands the silliness of human behavior in a really unique way. He captures the absurdity of the human condition in images like this. But she's fully in control here, and you kind of get the sense she knows what he's doing, and she thinks he's a putz. Maybe that's me reading it in because I'm familiar with Frank's work, right? I've seen tons of his stuff. It's, the whole butt signing thing, story between me and him was actually just one of these things that he kept, because I cosplay, he kept saying, why don't you do this character? Why don't you do that character? And he finally said, why don't you cosplay Shanna the She-Devil? And I said, Frank, I get arrested. They'd throw me out of here. And he started explaining how it could be done without getting thrown out of the Comic-Con, because it's basically just wearing a bikini. And I said, all right, Frank, if I cosplay Shanna the She-Devil, will you sign my butt? And that was me throwing him off his game, trying to say, all right, And he got shy for a minute. He goes, okay. And so it became, we did, you know, the annual butt signing 3 years in a row because it became sort of this funny thing. And it was like a Cabbage Patch Kid thing from the 80s for me, as I always thought it was weird that there were these kids' toys that had signatures on their butts. The creator of the Cabbage Patch Kids branded every single one of his creations. I mean, okay, Rosalina from Mario sold her children into slavery. Those little stars had to work for this weird, creepy plumber guy. But Rosalina didn't sign their butts, right? Xavier Roberts, I think that was the name of the Cabbage Patch guy. But he actually signed these little Cabbage Patch children's butts. It was weird, but I thought, hey, if that's okay for a child, it's okay for an adult, right? And that's me being satirical. And that's sort of the same thing, I guess. Frank and I think the same way, in that sort of way, that we see certain things in society as being sort of absurd. And it's not good or bad so much as, you know, we need to keep a check on these things and we need to have a chuckle about them so they don't go completely out of hand. Unfortunately, this particular situation has gone completely out of hand, with various people responding and saying these things. And I mean, the things that people said about this cover, which to me is fairly innocent. You know, it's up there with, you know, Gil Elfgren style pinup art, which I personally love, but, you know, it spawned all of this, right? J. Scott Campbell, okay, it is J. Scott Campbell, I was right, you know, responding, and the thing is, this is a lot of guys talking about it. I mean, this is agreement. You know, Frank Cho said, you know, thanks. He digs at him a little bit. Despite your haircut, you're a pretty smart guy. I mean, that's Frank right there. And he said, people need to lighten up and stop these silly overreactions and outrage over drawings on paper. You know, and then I'm going to go back to my drawing table and draw more naughty pictures that will crack the internet in half. Which he did do. Oops. Which he did do. Here. He did this. Is this one full? He basically, and this is the right thing to do when the internet goes crazy. If you don't think you've done anything wrong, you know, he took Harley Quinn, and this is funny, right? This is funny because, first of all, it's totally in character. Much like the Spider-Man Gwen Stacy one, the characters remain in character. No one is breaking character here to tell this joke. And that's important. But, you know, it's the Joker mucking around. It's very funny. I think it's very funny. And it's a great way to respond to hysteria. And this was, I don't remember if I said it in my video on the whole change the cover thing, the whole Batgirl cover with the Joker thing, that my concern was that since DC pulled that and, you know, responded to outrage and pulled it, that it was only going to get worse. And my concern, despite my personal concerns about, you know, what was going on with that cover and what it was saying about DC editorial, I didn't think that things should be pulled, because then it just opens Pandora's box and everyone gets smacked. I think that lessons need to be learned for next time. You know, don't do it again. Learn. But pulling something is a pretty major thing. And I mean, it's when it's people complaining. I don't even know how I feel about that whole Orson Scott Card thing. Although I think they ended up publishing that story specifically online or something like that. There was an outcry when DC published a Superman story written by Orson Scott Card, not because of the content of the story, but because of Orson Scott Card's personal views and political donations that people saw as opposing gay rights. And that's a very complicated separating the artist from the art issue that, you know, I think everybody sort of has to decide that one for themselves. There are no right or wrong answers because it's all about what people find entertaining, right? People shouldn't be forced to consume things they don't find entertaining. And that's what it comes down to. If you don't like it, don't buy it. Nobody should be forced to see things. Unfortunately, some things become such massive cultural, you know, juggernauts that we're forced to see them instead of, you know, being allowed to choose to see them. And there are certain game franchises, you know, like, you know, the much maligned Grand Theft Auto that I do think people throw around a little too brazenly. I think that, you know, media has to be a little more sensitive to the fact that that game is not to everyone's taste. That game upsets people. And so using images from Grand Theft Auto as something that symbolizes all of video games, that is tweaking people. And that, I think, more sensitivity needs to be shown in that regard. And that is very different than saying ban it. Okay? A lot of people, when I start making comments on this stuff, equate me saying show some sensitivity with ban it. And that's not the same thing. It's not the same thing, and I've practiced what I preach, okay? I used to do a very raunchy late night show. That's where the, I should have pulled this one up, but the Ultimate Spider-Man 100 mock-up cover it was another censored Frank Cho cover that actually was a variant where Mary Jane was getting out of the shower. And Spider-Man was going, hey, that's my girl, right? Which, consensual relationship, so the hell what? But they forced him to draw the towel higher. And so we recreated it. You can look it up, it's out there. Go.